Well, welcome to our pre-Thanksgiving lecture, the Kuzari. We are about we are in the first essay, about to read paragraph 103, which in this version that most of you have, I think the Rabbi Korobkin English translation would be on page 124. If you have any other version, then you'll just have to look for paragraph 103 in the first essay, in the Ma'amari Harishon. So the Kuzari, when I talk about the Kuzari, when we're talking about the book, again, I'm referring to the king of the Chazars in the conversation, and the Chaver is the rabbi. If I zero out and discuss the book in general, I might sometimes slip and say the Kuzari in a reference to the book, meaning Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, but I'll try to be careful. This is lecture number 11, and probably this week, not this week, but probably next week, we'll finish the first essay. So Amar HaKuzari, it was in 102. We kind of read this at the end last time, but the question is, you just convinced me, right, about the greatness of the Torah and the Jewish people and how God revealed the Torah to the Jewish people through the miracles of the Exodus and all of the great and the receiving of the Torah and the entry into the Holy Land and all these wonderful things. But if that's the case, why is this not being revealed to the entire world? Why doesn't the whole world have this same truth? Why is it that you guys basically it's only you're just practicing it, you Jews, and that's it? Why not everyone? And the Kuzari is asking a question that any philosopher would ask, right? If this is the truth, if Judaism represents the truth, right, then that truth should be evident to everyone, right? You should be trying to spread the truth to everyone. So this is a very fundamental question. And it's always interesting to understand the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's work in contrast to the Rambam, who would have said, yes, the truth is something that is for the entire world, right? We still want, for those of us that study that together, but the Chaver here is going to have a very different answer. And let's see what you think about his answer. So paragraph 103, Amar Chaver, and remember, I'm reading from the Michael or Michael Schwartz modern Hebrew translation. So Amar HaChaver, his first answer is, not every human being is the same, right? Not every living creature is the same. There's different levels of creatures. There's different levels of humans, right? Not every animal is a speaking animal, right? The human beings are a different type. Each one has a different role to play. Uvachein, and it must be shachachta, you've forgotten mashenemar kodem, that which we discussed before. Right? We talked about how the special quality, the special spiritual quality of prophecy, that special spiritual relationship with God that went from father to son, right? That started with one man, Shehu Garin Ha'achim, who was the chosen one of the brothers, Usgula Sa'ab, and who was the special one child that inherited that special quality from the father. Remember, he gave a lineage starting from Adam, going all the way down till Abraham, till Avraham Avinu, right? Each them mekabel osor, each son inherited from his father that special light. So the others didn't get that. They didn't inherit that special quality. Until the sons of Yaakov came, and all of them had this special quality, this special trait, that they were the seed, and they were separate from all other rest of humanity. With this specific quality, Elokis, this godly-like spiritual quality. They're almost like a different species, made out of a different material. Malachi, like angelic almost. Kulam bikshu at dargas and all of them were lived their lives in an attempt to achieve the level of prophecy. Many of them reached that level of prophecy. But even Misha Lo Isugua, even those that didn't reach that level, they were getting closer by doing the actions, which were the actions which did fulfilled God's will. Beiskachus, with holiness, Beitaros, with purity, Uvifkishas Anavim, and with meeting with and learning from the prophets that were among them. So that you should know that Kimisha Pogesh Navi, someone who does meet and converse with and have a relationship with a prophet, Bisman Bohu Pogesh Oso Vishomeat Milosov Elohiot, right? At the time when he meets the Navi and he hears his words and he hears his teachings, his godly teachings, Tara Loruchnius, he automatically experiences the spiritual experience. And he is separate from his ordinary human species with a special clarity, a special purity of his soul. Hanefesh tishtokek el osan hadargos utikabel al atzma hachnoa v'tahara. Right, that soul, that person will then desire further to rise up in levels until he gets to special levels of humility and purity. This itself was the biggest proof that they ever needed, and this clearest sign, right, that there's such a thing as a reward in the world to come. That which we desire from the world to come, that which we aspire to, is that the human soul should rise to the level where he becomes like godly, right? Like rising, bringing our soul back to God. Separate from his senses, his human physical senses. He then sees the upper worlds, the worlds of spirituality, and he gets a special pleasure and enjoyment in seeing the spiritual light, this angelic light, and hearing the special word of God. That soul, that is not worried about death. When our physical tools and utensils are gone, right? We're not worried about what's going to happen because we lived our lives raising ourselves in spirit closer and closer to God. Torah, when you find a teaching, that when you experience this special kind of teaching that teaches you, and by fulfilling its commandments and by living the life it teaches you how to live, you become a spiritual being, right? Right, doing it in the way that, in the place that it was meant to be done, which of course is the Holy Land, which is going to get to in more detail later. It is necessary that this teaching, certainly this is the kind of teaching which guarantees us, right, that it will remain with our soul even after our bodies are gone. So what did he do here? So he didn't give us a very universalistic answer at all, right? He gave us a very particularistic answer. He told us that the Jewish people are inheritors of this special spiritual quality that we received from our forefathers, and we are therefore on a higher level than other people, right? Now, for those that are more universalist minded, this can be a very troubling idea, right? And of course, that I'm one of those, that this is a very troubling idea. Now, but we're going to see, and every commentary that discusses this book notes the dramatic difference that this is between Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's philosophy and Rambam's philosophy, which was much more universalistic. So he basically is stating that there is a special quality. Now, what I would like to say is that there is something that we can do here, and I suggested this, I think, after we were not no longer recording in the last lecture, I suggested something. I forget. I think it was Jeffrey, but it may have been someone else. That aspect of it could be bothersome if you have if you're okay with being particularistic. I guess it's not bothersome, but if you're not okay with it, it can be troubling. However, the beautiful idea that he stated is something that we should definitely take from it, and I don't find it to be bothersome at all. I find it to be a wonderful idea, and that is that the Torah is teaching us to live a life devoted to spirituality, devoted to becoming closer and closer to God, right? So such a life, right? And the Torah teaches us to live. If we follow the Torah, we learn the Torah, we experience the Torah, we live the kind of life the Torah teaches us to live, what we ultimately gain is getting closer and closer to God, right? So that there's no fear in what's happening in the world to come, what's going to be after I'm gone. We're closer and closer to God. That's the kind of life that we live. That is something that I think we can take, regardless of where you are as far as your democratic ideals may be, right? That's something that we need to take from this paragraph, which is a beautiful, which he exposed and said in a really beautiful way. So now he says the Amar Kuzari. So now we're going to get into some of the things that you're about to hear that sound like some of the debates you hear all the time nowadays. When people talk about the differences between Judaism and the other religions, some of the fundamental philosophical differences he's going to get to, and these are some of the really important stuff. And so the Kuzari says then in 104 paragraph, right? He says, you're promising that in the afterlife, you're going to, right? You're going to just continue the spiritual journey that you started on, right? You lived this spiritual journey, your life of Torah, and basically dying is just continuing that spiritual journey, right? Where's all the heaven stuff, right? All the beautiful stuff. He says the other religions, the promises that the other religions, that Islam and Christianity give about some wonderful, wondrous heaven that you're going to go to, they're so much more full of wondrous, fat, delicious things and all kinds of beautiful ideas of heaven that you're going to get to, right? That you're going to get when you die as a reward for living the life that those religions teach, right? Like, why would I want to join your religion? What are you promising me, right? Promise me some kind of grand paradise in the future. And so Amar Chaver, right? So the Chaver, the rabbi, answers him in a beautiful, beautiful way in paragraph 105. Avol kulan acharei hamaves. All of those people, all of those two other religions that are arguing here with the Jews, presumably this conversation is happening when the representatives of the other religion are standing in the room because it's a conversation. He says all of those guys are making promises that happen after you die, right? They tell you if you do this now, then when you die, you're going to get some great reward. But nothing happens in their lives, right? Nothing happens in their lives that shows us that this is going to happen. There's no proof, right? They're telling you there's going to be a heaven. It's going to happen, right? Believe that there's going to be a heaven, right? But for us, our entire lives is a spiritual journey. What we live every day, and he's going to say this more in his own words, right? So the Kuzari says, Achein, it's true. And the Kuzari, the king of the Chazars, kind of jokingly jokingly says, all those people that claim to believe in all those promises about the heaven, and I haven't seen too many of them that are waiting, that are trying to die soon so that they can experience it. Right? It's all well and good. They tell you, do this, like this religion teaches, whether it's Christianity or Islam, because you're going to get, now, this might be an exception for, I don't want to, okay, well, I'll leave that out. But everybody still wants to live, right? Nobody's so excited about dying, right? If they could keep pushing it off and live longer, and they could they could live for another 1,000 years. They'd rather live, even if they were poor, even if they didn't have everything, they'd still rather live. Nobody's looking forward to death, right? So he's kind of joking, so they make those promises. Now, so then he says, so Amar Chaver, this is 107, right? Uma datcha al misha haya aid laosam ma'amodim atzumim umalachim. What about those people who bear witness to those incredibly powerful experiences, right? I'm talking to you about the experience of the Jewish people, right? Those people who bear witness to it and the special spirituality of it. What Rabbi Yehuda Levi is really referring to, he's not just referring to Ma'amad Har Sinai and the Exodus. He's referring to the day-to-day lived experience of every Jew, right? Every Jew lives a day-to-day experience of spirituality that's a special, beautiful experience. Every mitzvah that we do, when we do it with love, it's a beautiful thing. What about those people? What do you think about those people that living that experience? So he says, the Kuzari answers in 108, what he would want is that that his soul should always be separate from his senses. In other words, he should live a constant spiritual life because it's such a wonderful thing. So that his soul should consistently benefit from that wonderful light. This is the kind of person, right, who may desire death, right? Now the Chaver, so that's the Kuzari saying that he may desire it because that's when he's ultimately even closer to God. The Chaver is going to have a long answer to this in 109, which is a very, very important piece of the essay. So let's go ahead. Go ahead, please ask.
Well, it seems to me that the Kuzari did not, from my point of view, he did not ask the obvious question. The whole motivation behind this interview was that he was trying to decide what group, which one he should adopt. And,
right.
And what you're saying is that, and what Chaver is saying, that Judaism is this chosen, inherited quality. So I mean, if it seems to me the obvious question for the Kuzari is say, how can I become this? I mean, I didn't inherit this. How can I just become part of that?
I'm happy that you brought that up for a bunch of reasons. First of all, he is going to discuss how to become a Jew later, but the remarkable thing about the Chaver here, the rabbi, is he never ever tries to convince the Kuzari to become a Jew, right? Nothing he says is designed to convince him to become a Jew, right? In other words, you're asking me what Judaism believes, how Judaism experiences, how we view our relationship with God, but he never tries to convince him, right? The others, the very inherent nature of their religion itself is all about convincing other people, whether by coercion or by convincing, to join, right? The Chaver, remarkably, never tries to convince the Kuzari, right? And the Kuzari he almost made a mistake. Remember, we mentioned just a few paragraphs ago how he said, that's how we started tonight. If it's the truth, it should be for everyone. And then the Chaver, he doesn't answer that question. He doesn't address that question. It's not about philosophical truth, right? Of course it's true, but that's not the point. The point is we live this wonderful spiritual life that brings us closer and closer to God. And we have this special, beautiful relationship. He never answered the question, right?
He says it's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone.
Not for everyone. So why is it? How could it be for the Kuzari? I mean, how does he know that he could just? Maybe it's not for him either.
Maybe not. I mean, we'll see as the conversation develops. But remarkably, the Chaver never tries to convince him to become one, right? To become a Jew. And if and he will talk about the process of Giyur, how conversion could possibly work in his theme. But in the meantime, when he asked him, if it's true, then it should be true for me, right? He didn't answer that question. He said, because basically that's what he's asking him. If it's true, then why aren't you convincing me, right? But I'm not, because then he starts talking about this beautiful spiritual relationship that we have with God, right? So let's see how this continues, right? So Kuf test, this is 109. So this starts a pretty long and this is crucial. This is basic Judaism 101 that everyone needs to understand. And it's the basic Judaism 101 that people from other religions they can't wrap their heads around it. They're so convinced about what religion means, right, that they don't understand that Judaism doesn't teach that. Judaism has a completely different idea about what our goals and dreams and so on, right? The whole concept, the whole idea that Christianity teaches, right, that if you accept these articles of faith, then you're going to go to heaven, right? If you believe in Jesus, whatever, Muhammad, you say the thing, you'll go to heaven. That's not our goal. That's not what we do. That's just not how it works. Judaism works completely differently. And the Chaver is about to explain what the point of Judaism is. Omar Chaver, the Chaver answered him, Hamuftach lanu hu shenidbak b'davar eloki, right? That which we are guaranteed, right, is not some reward in the world to come. But what we're guaranteed is a relationship with God, right? That we should be attached to spirituality. That is our promise. That's what God promises us. Banevua, through prophecy, or some things that are similar or on the path towards prophecy. And that we have this special relationship that God cares for us specially. So his relationship, it goes two ways. Our relationship to him is spiritual, and his relationship to us is special. He treats us so that, when we behave, he rewards us. When we sin, he punishes us. We have this relationship, right? That is the promise, period. That's the promise. And you have to let that melt, right? The very fact that we have this special relationship is inherently the very reward that we are promised by God, that we have a special relationship. The Movsim of Anisim, right, that God attaches himself to us with this special hashgacha, which is special providence, and even through signs and miracles at times. The Torah doesn't say, Im tekaimu es haTorah hazos, if you keep this Torah, I'm going to bring you, and after you die, to some special garden and some special place full of pleasure. It doesn't say that ever, anywhere in the Torah, right? There is no promise. It's hard because many of you probably have had the experience at some point in your life, a conversation with people. It usually comes from people that rejected religion because they say, this religion promised me that after I die, I'll get this, but it's all a bunch of baloney. Well, Judaism doesn't even talk about that. It's just not part of Judaism. I mean, okay, maybe there's talks of heaven here and there, but that's not the point, right? The point is the relationship. Elohim Omer, Jeff, I see your hands up. Just give me 1 second. Rather, what God says is, Atemtili b'nei aliyah, you should be people that are spiritually elevated people, and I will be your God that leads you through the world. You be spiritual, you serve me, you worship me, you live a life of spirituality, and I will respond in kind, and I will be there for you to help lead you and guide you through this world and through your life. That's it. That's the bottom line of Judaism. That's why we do it. And that's an incredibly beautiful thought. But anyway, go ahead. I see your hands up.
Yeah. When I'm reading this translation, I'm getting confused and off track. I understand the word you just used, and that's certainly consistent with, attachment, commandments,
Okay.
to God, divinity. It's beautiful. I love it. Thank you. But they talk here, at least in this translation, through prophecy and near prophecy. Through prophecy and near prophecy.
So I translated that a little bit different.
Okay.
I translated through prophecy, and I said things that are similar, things that lead to prophecy, or things that are close to it.
Let's talk about the prophecy. There's that passage in the Torah where Moses wishes all the people would be prophets.
Right.
So kind of part of that theme.
Yeah, it's that same idea.
Yeah,
it's that idea. Yeah,
But
and that we all, and even Rambam had a similar idea too. And more Nevuchim, remember he said that all of us have a certain level, can have a certain level of prophecy. He said levels, right? And when we and by living a life of Torah, right, we approach it, right? We may not all get to the actual highest level, but we are moving in that direction.
okay, well, I guess I'm getting confused by the definition of prophecy. Um, uh, to the extent you're equating prophecy with attachment to God, okay, that solves my
Well,
problem.
that's consistent with what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is saying
Oh, I
here.
see. Okay,
That
so that
prophecy is being spiritual, like an angel,
uh,
right?
okay.
Right.
So
It's not
prophecy
so much.
doesn't mean necessarily being able to understand the future or that
That's
kind of
one
thing.
thing that we all have to get out of our brains,
Okay, yeah,
right?
okay, you're right.
And never in Judaism does prophecy have anything to do with telling the future. If that was the case, right,
Right.
then then all the prophets would be false prophets, right? Because lots of them told the future, which didn't happen, right? There's
Yeah.
only one prophet in the entire Torah
Mhm.
whose prophecy, right? But well, actually, no. Well, the prophecy of Yonah, right? This is the best example, right?
Okay.
You know, he was told they're gonna the city is gonna be destroyed, right?
Mhm.
But the point was, did the city get destroyed? No,
Okay.
right? Right. So
Right.
he's a false prophet, but no, he's not a
Okay.
false
Okay.
prophet because the purpose of a prophecy is to teach the wisdom of God. If you don't repent, then
Yeah,
you will
right.
be
If you don't,
destroyed,
so
right?
that was
The
true.
point was so that the prophecy shouldn't happen,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's true about all the prophecies, right?
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's true about the good ones too, right? The prophecies of Isaiah about the wonderful future of beating their swords into plowshares, right? We still actually have to get to the level where we beat our swords into plowshares, right? If people are bad and evil and fight with each other and refuse to stop, then it ain't gonna happen, right? What Isaiah is telling us what can, what should, right? But not what will, right? And we have to understand the entire Torah is the entire Torah is a big if, and we're going to see that in the Kuzari right now. Prophecy has nothing to do with telling the future. It has to do with telling us the consequences of our actions, right? If you behave yourself, you'll be fine. If you don't, you won't. Period. I mean, that's a very simplistic way, but that's the bottom line, right? You know, and that's what the Torah is about, and that's what the Kuzari is about to tell us, right?
Okay.
So the idea that prophecy is telling us the future is complete misunderstanding of the entire Tanakh. It's a misunderstanding of what prophecy is. Wisdom is knowing the wisdom of God, right? And so you can tell people, you know what? If you're going to stick your hand in the fire, it's going to get burnt, right? So be careful, act right, right? And that's a prophecy. So right? There are some of you, God says, I will be your God. Some of you will reach the heights of holiness and you'll come all the way up to heaven with me, right? Like those that were actually in their visions were literally walking with God, right, together with the angels, right? And they are like my angels that are going among the people on the land. You could see these individuals that they lead you and guard you and take care of you, right? And you will constantly live within the land, the special land that helps, the land that's holy, so that the land, the special holy land, which enables and allows this kind of spiritual growth and connection. Right, Halohi Eretz Mikdeshes, which is of course the Holy Land, Pidjona, right, O Batzorta, right, whether it's in its redemption or in its difficult times, Tuva or Rasa, whether it's good or bad. That's the whole point. That's what we were just saying before about prophecy. It's telling this special holiness is both good and bad, right? If you when you live this kind of life of attachment to God, right, then it could be good, it could be bad. It all depends on you. It depends on your behavior. Right, right? It's going to be dependent on this holy thing in conjunction with, right, together with your actions. The rest of the world just goes about and does its natural thing. So this is again the particularistic, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in here, right? The rest of the world doesn't have this special relationship. Everything is natural, right? Everything just goes about the natural way according to the laws of nature. Prat lachem, except for you. For you, it's a special relationship with God, and it all depends on your spiritual connection to God. If when the Shekhinah resides among you, when the God's presence, then in the future you will find redemption on your land in such a way that your physical needs will be taken care of. Right, and you won't have all the various calamities and things that happen at bad times, right, that you could suffer from, right, and you'll be strong over your enemies, so you'll have the power to, an ability to live a life of spirituality. So your lives are not going to be going according to the simple natural laws. Now remember, Elahu Ritzoni, it goes according to my desire, and mine meaning God's desire. Barry, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yes. In the Torah, we often interpret some of the blessings and curses to be collective, and I wonder, is the rabbi writing here about the individual or about the whole community?
I think the answer to that is definitely the whole community, right?
Okay.
He's definitely talking about the whole community. And some of the questions that are probably floating in the back of some of our minds is well, do we really see this? When we are on a spiritual level, do we actually is everything really cool? Does God really act that way towards us? Right? Why, the old question of, so then how come even sometimes innocent people suffer? Part of that answer is collective, right? Right. So, but that's not the whole answer. And he will, to some degree, deal with that. But it's okay to have those questions bounce around your mind, the natural questions, but he'll kind of get to it. The Kuzari is going to challenge him with that. I don't know if we'll get to that tonight, but we will.
Actually,
right?
there was one recent example when the attack on the bus stop happened and those three men that were killed. The Shabak was able to say that since the beginning of 2025, there were 1,040 attempts that were stopped before they came to be. So, like,
Wow.
in that way, the Ashgacha is seriously like.
Yeah, the attacks that don't happen never make the news. Like they say, if the FBI does their job properly, we wouldn't have any. We wouldn't think they're great, right? Because you'd never see the good work that they do, right? Because we just walk around our lives and there wouldn't be any terror attacks, right? So thank you. So Kamosha im Tamru. Right. In a similar way, if you rebel, asidim atem liros batzoras, then you're going to see hunger, yovesh, drought, dever, and plagues, chapachayos, teref, and wild animals, bod kol ha'olam shalev. Even at a time when the rest of the world is at peace, you're going to find yourself suffering. So there's a good side and a bad side, right? All depending on your special relationship with God. So even in the bad stuff, right? You still see that things are happening to you that are just out of the ordinary, just something beyond the ordinary. Now, I would venture to say that regardless of how particularistic or universalistic you may want to be in your own heart and soul, right? Anyone that has even a smidgen of knowledge of Jewish history, and I'd venture to guess that those of us that are here tonight have at least a smidgen of knowledge of Jewish history, understands that it's impossible to deny the special relationship we have with God, right? No matter how, it's not that I can answer every question, God forbid, why do people suffer the Holocaust? Why, things like that. We can't answer those questions, but it's impossible to look at our history and not see something special, and not see something remarkable, and not see something different than the rest of the world. And I'm not saying that because I think I'm better than everyone else. God forbid, not at all. I'm saying I'm not a particularist, right? Right. I like the Rambam on that argument. That's what I mean by we can take what Rabbi Yehuda Levi says, and even if there's a couple things that I don't like, right, which I've stated what they were, but the general point here is that this remarkable relationship and the special nature of our relationship with God is something that is special and we're proud of. And I'm going to do a little spoiler. We're going to see later how he says that even today, even when we're in his day, right? Today meaning in his day, which is for the most part, Jews were a lot worse off than when we are today. For the most part, not that we don't have our things we suffer from, but he said the very fact that every Jew refuses to join, to be a Christian, all you need to do is make a few statements in church and you're done. To be a Muslim, you say the Shahada and you're done, right? And you can get away from all this suffering, but nobody, not nobody, but so few people do it, right? Because we love being the way we are, even though we're living in this miserable condition, right? We want to be this. There's something special. So, because people look at us and say, well, why would you want to be a Jew? Well, does anyone here really, would you ever want to be anything else? No. But people look, but nobody likes you guys. There's anti-Semitism here. There's anti-Semitism from the right. There's anti-Semitism from the left. This is from the top, from the bottom, from here, from there. They chase us around. In his day, literally, they're dying every day, getting killed every day, exiled every day, right? But did Rabbi Yehuda Levi ever think for a minute that he would want to be anything else but a Jew, right? So that special relationship is a gift. It's a reward. It's something special that we have. It's that relationship, right? That spiritual connection we have to God that we would never, that itself is the reward. No 72 virgins in heaven or golden gates in paradise and prince this or saints so-and-so giving you a nice big birthday cake. I don't know, whatever it is. None of that nonsense, right? The relationship itself is the reward. That is what it is. The reward is you and I sitting here together on a Wednesday night learning. That's it. That's the reward, right? And think about that. Let that sink in. That's something beautiful, so that you can't, and the way and the power with which Rabbi Yehuda Levi says these ideas is remarkable. You can understand why this book had so much influence on Judaism, on us, as a people, and how this book resonated with the people that were reading it in his time, and why it was so incredibly popular. L'chol haftachoseh shel haTorah zos yesh arubos. Right? In every, I want to just turn the page to what I'm in the middle of 109, right? Right. Everything in every promise the Torah makes, there's arubos, there's guarantees, right? Ein chashash tufarna, and there's no question that no one ever doubted that they're going to be fulfilled. There's no way they're ever going to be broken. The guarantees given in the Torah are solid, 100%, right? Because they are relevant, right, to that which happens after we die. However, all of the promises, right? No, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. That makes a big difference. So all of the Torah guarantees let me read this again because I made a pretty stupid mistake. I'm sorry. All of the guarantees of the Torah are solid, 100%. There's no question that they're going to be kept. And like I said before, the relationship that we were just discussing is something that's solid, something that's real, something that we know and we all feel. However, but the promises that those other religions promised, all those teachings, right? There's no guarantees, right? They're promises about what's going to happen after you die. They tell you live this life, and then after you die, who knows? Can you promise me what's going to happen? I have no freaking clue what's going to happen after you die. And no Jew ever claims to know what's going to happen after you die, right? Because and Rabbi Yehuda Levi isn't telling us what's going to, because he doesn't know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter, right? Whatever spirituality we lived in our lives is going to go on, right? It's just going to go on because we're not worried about those things, right? But all the promises that our Torah, that our teaching tells us, Meshutaf Ikaron Echad, is included in just one main idea, B'hu HaTikva. It is the hope, L'hiskarev La'el L'Malachov, to become close to God and his angels, meaning, those being, the spirituality that we get as we get close to God. A person who reaches that level of spirituality is not worried about death. We're not worried about what's going to happen after I die. And I tell you, I drive around Alabama all the time, and there's billboards, what's going to be after you die? Judaism, we're not even asking that question. It's just not a question that we ask. I don't care. I really don't care. I'm not a Jew because by being a Jew, I'm going to get some reward after I die. That's not why I'm a Jew, right? And this is so remarkable. This is just so beautiful. I don't even know I could. It's just absolutely stunningly beautiful idea, and it's really the foundation of what we're about. Torah zos hutzka b'fanenu v'ra'inu b'mo'inenu. This special teaching, right? It's been presented to us, right? And we've seen it with our own eyes. We experience it in our own lives. And he's going to give a mashal, a parable, right? So I do want to finish this parable, but before we finish tonight. So a lot of the parable loses its power in the days when monarchs don't mean much to us anymore. But let's just try to bring ourselves back to a day when the world is ruled by monarchs, right? So we can compare us to a bunch of friends, people. They're wandering in the desert. They're lost souls wandering. They whatever. Okay, a group of guys. They're all good friends, right? So one of them goes and travels to India. He's picking a faraway place because he mentioned India several times as this faraway place, and it has some sort of like a magical association with it. Like, the king of India is like, making him be some grand, wonderful king or whatever. It's also safe to use Hodu because any other king that's in his area, he'll be taking sides. He's talking to the king of Kuzari right now. By talking about some faraway king in some lost land, he's not stepping on any political landmines. So you have this king out in India. So this guy travels to the king, and the king of Hodu, he sees he's a great guy, and he gives him all kinds of honor and greatness. And he says that because I know that you're a member of that group that's in the desert, and everybody knows they're a bunch of good guys, so I'm going to give you something special. I'm going to make you special, right? Shekain Hikers Avosam Ilfanam, and he says, yeah, I know those guys in the desert. The king of Hodu says, those are good guys. My grandfathers, they liked me, and I liked them, and we got along, and they gave me something to drink, and that was good, all right? So he gave them all kinds of wonderful gifts, and he gave this guy wonderful gifts. He told him, go back to your friends in the desert, who will be so big they cover, and he dressed him up in nice clothes. Right? And he said, not only am I going, but I'm going to send you some of my ministers, right, in my court, are going to go with you out into the desert with all these special gifts. And ministers who never thought they were going to leave the court. They never thought they were certainly going to be sent into the middle of the desert, right? And he told him, when you go out there, I want you to do certain things, ubrisos, and certain agreements, that you have to do all these special things, right? And probably including, I need help with something out there in the desert. There's some enemies on the other side. I need you to defend over there. I need you to work on this. And I don't know, whatever, plant some crops that I need, whatever it is that you need to do, right? So he comes to his friends in the desert, right, with his new friends that are all nobles from India. And and they accepted them with the great kindness. And they tried to give them honor and respect. And they built a palace for them, where they can live. And the friends wanted to go to Hodu to see the king. They wanted to know from these special new agents of the king, how do we get there? What do we need when we go there? What do we do to make the king happy, etc. And they all knew that if you accept upon yourself to do all of those things that the king commanded, that's the best way to go. If you're going to go to the palace, you want to be able to say, I did all the things you asked me to do, right? And you can say, look, you sent your messengers and we gave them honor. We put them in a palace. We took care of them, right? They don't need to ask, why do we have to do all these things? It's obvious. They want to do these things because they want to make the king happy, because the king helped them out and send them all these messengers. They want to attach themselves to this great king. The wealth is simply the attachment to the king, right? So these groups of this people that are out there in the desert is referring to the people of Israel. The first guy that traveled is Moshe. He goes up to heaven. And the other people that come along are the prophets that came along in generations later. And the special messengers are the God's presence, and the angels are the messengers, right? The special clothing is the special light, the special intellect that a person has in his soul that he gets through prophecy. And the special treasures are the 2 luchos in Maser Sadibros with the 10 statements in the luchos. But the other people that aren't members of this group in the desert, right? They didn't see all this, right? Right? So wait, before I say this, right? So the bottom line is, so this is our relationship. Our special relationship with God is because we received these gifts. We know this, we know the gifts. We know them because our person came back and told us about it. We've experienced them. We see them. We see that special light. We see the tablets. We see the commandments. We have his people with us. We're experiencing it. We're living it. But the other religions, they didn't see any of it. Right? They're saying, accept upon yourself to listen to the king, right? Because then in the future, you're gonna, after you die, you're gonna attach yourself to the king, right? And if you don't, then after you die, you're gonna go to hell, and he's gonna make you suffer, right? So that's all those other religions are promising. They're not promising any special relationship. They're not showing you any experience. They're not giving you the lived experience of attachment to God. They're just giving you a promise that if you do this, later on you'll be good. If you don't do this, then later on you're going to go to hell. That's all they're telling you. Do this so that later, but there's no lived experience, right? Some of the people from those other religions, some of them may say, right? Right? The guy might get up and say, right? Nobody has ever come from the dead and told me what happened, right? Right? I have no idea, right? Somebody will question the leaders of these religions and say, has anyone come back to you from heaven and told you that I got myself the 72 virgins, or I got myself the special through pearly gates and golden plates, or whatever it is that they have up there? All right. Has anyone ever come to you and told you about the fires of hell? No. Right? You don't know this. Why should I believe you? Right? Right? But in general, right, what they did was they've accepted it and they've pushed others, right, to keep it, right? How? Right? With either they just have a very weak belief in this, because deep down they know that it's doubtful. They know that it can't be proven. They know that no one's ever proven it. So they constantly have to convince themselves. If you ever talk to a person who's a devout member of one of those other religions, they get so strong in it and insisted and insisted and insisted and insisted and insisted in it, because whenever someone does that, it usually belies some weakness in the background. Like, why do I believe this? Right? Now, as a Jew, we don't have such a thing. There's no such concept. Come to me and ask me, right? What is it that I have to believe in, right? For some that I can't prove. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, because that's not what my religion is about, right? It's not, I'm going to insist that it's just, no, I don't know. I love my religion because I love to learn Torah. I love to do the mitzvos. I love the relationship that I develop with spirituality through my religion, period. That's it. I love it. It's great. It's wonderful, right? I don't have to sit and insist and insist and insist, or, and then if someone questions it, okay, question it. We've been spending years together with the Rambam and now in the Kuzari constantly questioning. There's nothing wrong with questioning. You're allowed to doubt things. When people insist things, you can doubt them. You can argue. You can disagree if you don't like it, right? So either they get a very weak connection, right? On the outside, they pretend that it's a really strong belief, right? And the way they do it is by forcing the simple-minded people to live that life, and forcing them. You have to believe in this, you have to practice this way, right? Shalem ba'amuna. Remember, he's speaking in a time when the rabbinic establishment, to the extent that such a thing even existed in those days, wasn't forcing any Jews to stay Jewish. They didn't have any power to do so, even if they wanted to. That is simply not part of the experience of religious Jewish life in the time of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, right? Nobody was walking around saying, right, you have to believe. The Jews were just Jews because they were, right? And are. And how do they do this? By convincing them that after you die, you're going to have some either hell or heaven, right? Elyonos, more than that which they actually can see in their lifetimes. Right? Isn't the substance and the nature of the prophets and those that I'm trying to think of a better word than those that believe in them. He says the pious, but chosim means the ones that it's faith, but it's not faith the way they use it most of the time today. Someone who's chosim is someone that looks to someone for guidance, looks to the prophets for guidance. Isn't that more closer to the true everlasting eternity than someone who isn't even close to that level? So this is how he ends chapter 109, paragraph 109. I'm going to stop here because we had some really powerful, beautiful stuff, but also we're almost out of time, and I want to leave time for questions and comments. But go ahead. I see your hand up. So fire away.
I appreciate the generosity or the spirit when you're saying there was no compulsion to be Jewish. How is it? But in terms of observation, you have these communities in other religions, and certainly Judaism is one of them, where the penalty for not, if you will, subscribing to our belief system, however vague it may be in this context, is very severe. I mean, it's a total exclusion, excommunication. You see it, you can observe it. So in terms of the compulsion to be Jewish, there's also an argument. It's not because of the inward rewards and the closeness to God, all the things you've beautifully outlined, but because the very idea in many communities of not being Jewish is so severe that, what should I say, there is a compulsion element in the nature of our culture and other cultures.
Yeah, I mean, the conclusion that I would make from what we just read tonight would be that Rabbi Yehuda Levi wouldn't agree with such compulsion.
Okay.
You know, um, now you know, I know what you're talking about. I mean, and when we learned in Rambam, there were certainly aspects where he said, someone who doesn't believe in one God, it should be all kinds of not so wonderful things to say about them. So there is some level of compulsion there, but based on the argument Rabbi Levi is making, he is certainly presenting an ideal Judaism, right? That doesn't involve compulsion at all, right? And it's certainly, and it's not, and nobody's trying to convince you to be Jewish by telling you this is true. Well, there may be such things, right? There may be some groups of Jews where they convince you have to be this and this and this. You have to do these things because of what's going to happen in Olam Haba, right? There's such things exist. Those things. To some degree, they're foreign influences in our religion. To some degree, when they told you, and when some teacher might have told you once when you were a kid that if you do an avera, then when you die you're going to burn in hell. Those could be very. Rabbi Yehuda Levi certainly would not agree with that based on what he said now. That's not fundamental Judaism. That's mostly foreign influence.
Okay.
But it does exist, and I don't think it's Judaism. I think those are community dynamics. A lot of the things that you mentioned, a lot of it is community dynamics. But yeah, I'm not here to say that we're all perfect, but I am here to say what Rabbi Yehuda Levi is presenting as what authentic Judaism is in his opinion. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah. So one thing I've heard that is one serious problem with dependence on the afterlife, and I don't know how accurate this is that that the 72 virgins is a mistranslation, and that the actual meaning of the phrase is 72 raisins, and people would find that out the hard way. It could be kind of disappointing, but also I also the question I had is earlier on you said something about how I think you said you're not a particularist. And I mean, given everything that you said tonight, and maybe I'm not understanding exactly what you mean by that, because it seems like from what you've said, I don't see how that could be true. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean, and also given Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim. I mean, given that, I mean,
so if you take my Maimonidean style view of this, right, the ultimate goal, right, is not that we should be special and separate from everyone else, but that the entire world should eventually join in all together as one in worship of God and have this relationship with God, right? So we were chosen because we developed this relationship with God, starting with Avram Avinu, right? And we were chosen to really lead the world in that direction, right? That's a universalistic picture. So we do have something very special, right? It's a very special relationship with God, right? That we have that others don't, right? But not because others don't have any access to it or can't do it, but because we're just fortunate enough to have it, because our forefathers walked on that path on their own. Our forefathers, Avram Avinu, and chief among them, chose to follow God, right? Chose to follow a monotheistic path. But ultimately, and if you learn through, certain aspects of Tanakh, especially say for Yeshayahu, right, you see this vision like laid out for you that the V'naharu love Kol Hagayim, right? All the nations of the world will stream towards Jerusalem to worship God together as one. So ultimately, will there be, and Yeshayahu ends in the last chapter, V'gam mehem, even from among them, from among the non-Jewish nations, there will be priests and Levites, etc. Right? There's other ways to interpret these things. I get it. I realize, and there's all kinds of ways to read it, but a universalistic approach is that approach, right? So that's what I mean when I say I personally find that to be more appealing. And maybe it's because I grew up in America, and I have egalitarian tendencies, but that's would be, but I'm admitting my biases up front. That's, but but the Kuzari is really the particularistic aspect of what he said, is presenting a different approach. And but I'm being intellectually honest. I'm learning it, teaching it exactly the way he says it. And but when there's two different opinions among the Rishonim, we're allowed to pick and choose. We're allowed to find where our souls connect. But it's important for us to see them all, and there's so much to learn from Rabbi Levi that it would be a shame to not learn from him, because there's a couple of things I don't like. There's just so much beautiful things in there. Anyway, I see another. Does that answer the question?
I just wanted to close. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote this Dignity of Difference book, and he has a different viewpoint in terms of how we view other religions and other cultures, where he's making no judgmental differentiation. He says they're all basically equally valid for their people. So it's a little different take on.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. And that's actually, I don't, a lot of that begins with Maimonides, right? Because the idea that the Torah is a way to God, and it is the best way or the easiest way or the right way or whatever, but there's other paths, right?
Okay.
So when one starts with that assumption, then one can go in the direction that you just mentioned. And I would not be surprised if I didn't read this particular essay by Rabbi Sachs. So I don't know for sure, but I would not be. I'm sorry.
It's a book, not an essay.
Okay, so I didn't read the book, but I wouldn't be surprised if he quotes Maimonides directly on that one. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot to say about universalism versus particularism. And we're gonna come back to it throughout the book, but I am pointing it out because I chose to learn this book after Rambam, because I want everyone to understand these different approaches, and they're important. We need to understand how our religion developed, and the different philosophies that are out there, and it's each one contributed so much to who we are today that we need to know it. Any other comments or questions before we call it a night? All right, well, I'll wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a good Shabbos, and I look forward to next week when we continue. All right, be well.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you.